Hi everyone, this is immigration lawyer John Khosravi. Thank you for joining this episode of the Immigration Lawyers Podcast, number 228. This is let's see where we're going on. This is going to be an annual review, going over what happened in the year 2021 with regards to immigration law, obvious general education stuff meant for a professional audience, but not intended for individual consumption for legal decisions or anything like that. It's like late February, mid to late February right now. We're going to be talking about this. But it just, you get really busy and you put off something that should have been done on January 1st to February 19th. But we're getting there. And it just, on the internal side of what's going on with the Immigration Lawyer Toolbox, and with on my end, things have gotten really good, really busy to the point where I had to hire a bunch. So we went from like one person, which was myself for 12 years, to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 people in a matter of 6 months. Obviously, they're not all legal. It's like a marketing and not 6 months, over a year, but all sorts of different angles of what we do. And I got to hire more to be able to manage and get the toolbox out. The magazine is out, which I'm really proud of. Unfortunately, that got kind of delayed. But if you go to immigrationlawyerstoolbox.com/magazine, colleagues really outdid themselves and put some outstanding material on all different subjects of immigration law in issue 4 of the magazine. And on the cover, we have our wonderful colleague, Spojmi Nasidi, who's an Afghan person herself, and she talks about the crisis and how she's dealing with it, because there's just so much. As I'm sure you all get calls about the situation as well. Definitely check out the Toolbox magazine, and we're going to work on getting these out faster and managing them. I got to start collecting articles for issue number 5. Could be around 3 months. We'll see how we do about that. But we're creating a system, and so I do want to thank number one person really is the sponsor of the podcast and of the magazine, one of the primary sponsors to help keep this going. DocuWise, obviously, most listeners probably already have DocuWise, but it's an all-one form system that's expanding all sorts of different things, and they're very responsive kind of group, which I like. If you want to get 10% off your annual plan, just go to DocuWise.com/immigration-lawyers-podcast. Use the code Immigration Lawyers Podcast. Talk with them. If you have, tell them what you like, what you don't like. They're open to hear it. They want to make the best product out there. That's what I really appreciate. And I interview one of the co-founders every quarter, pretty much, to see what's going on, what's updated, fill us in, so catch those service provider podcasts that are separate from the number podcasts of this podcast. So podcast. Okay, so I want to thank you. Check out the magazine. It's a lot of labor of love. It's definitely. I'm losing money, frankly, doing it, but I think in the long term, it's such a valuable thing to do, and it's so fun and interesting. So I really want to get your support to really support you too. We get listeners who come in who say, I have a interesting article on to write. I'm like, what's the topic? We work on it, we get it in there. So that's something that's really cool. So today we're going to talk about not the podcast. We're going to talk about annual review of what happened in 2021, going down memory lane. What we do is so chaotic at times. It changes so fast that we kind of forget, what happened from months ago, because every day there's new policy or change, and we're just caught up in the work of our clientele. So it's good to go back and see where we're going, where we came from. It's just kind of a fun thing to do. It's definitely worth it. So I went back and researched the different things that popped up in 2021 and put it all together, and have a list of just stuff that were notable. And so the most notable, obviously, that we all had to deal with were the various travel bans. I mean, some people who don't do as much consular processing probably didn't have to deal with that, but the travel bans, obviously, President Trump had his own version of them. Those were undone when Biden came place, which was good. They phased those out. But then we got a different level of travel bans due to the COVID-19 virus. And that was really debilitating on global travel and global trade. Airplanes going empty, people getting stuck outside. And we're going to talk about the delays that happened in the embassy, but embassy staff, consular officers weren't there. So we have like years of delays in some cases. It's out of control. And one thing that they did is they created a waiver system for the COVID-19 travel bans, where they said, first, it was really nice is you can contact CBP and ask the port like if they could issue a waiver, and those are coming in really good. They were doing a really good job at those, getting them done. And then all of a sudden, overnight, they shut those down, which is awful. And you had to deal with the embassies, and the embassies were overbooked and understaffed already. So if someone had an emergency, I think it might be wait 3 or 4 weeks just for them to read the emergency. And congressional help stuff wasn't very helpful. So that was like a really bad experience. And I talked to a lot of colleagues who do volume employment-based immigration, and they're like busy as heck, and they're saying they're making tons of money, but they all said it like they're like, we shouldn't have to get this money. I don't want this at all because we just suck in so much time trying to do these waivers, especially when CBP can no longer do it, and the embassies were doing it. It was so difficult, so time consuming, and you couldn't get to the work of developing your practice, handling the actual case of the clients. You're busy doing mass numbers of waiver requests. So it's when we get into this business to file waivers. Like I mean, there's 601 waivers, something like that, but not COVID-19 waivers. And when they don't process it, and you have to fight, and the clients get frustrated. So it was a really negative experience altogether. And who knows if the travel bans from moving to people really help the disease or not? Who knows? But these bans are kind of shut down at this point, but the consequences are there where there's so many countries in the world, their embassies aren't even interviewing people still, or they'll open up, they'll shut down, they won't do tourist visas, and they just do immigrant visas. And even with those, there's a priority of marriage cases, but I have marriage cases going a year and a half before getting interviews after being documentally qualified at the National Visa Center. So we're still seeing this stuff happen. And with regard to disease, the next thing that popped up was the vaccine requirement that went into effect on October 1st for those applying for immigrant visas or adjustment of status. After that, if you have a medical sign, you need to have the COVID-19 vaccine. And this is going to be a controversial issue, especially in immigration law space, where we see a lot of people are unwilling to take on clients or accept clients or consult with them if they're not, willing to get the vaccine, taking it, in a negative sense, saying we don't want to deal with these people. That's something you got to decide for yourself. But there's a good number of people I consult with who have clean marriage cases. And then we talk about, the issues of inadmissibility other than health and affidavit support, and if this marriage is real or if this employment is good. And then I said at the end, oh, by the way, are you cool with getting the vaccine? Have you gotten already? And there's a good number of people who don't have it and don't want to get it. I have several consultations where they said, we'll just wait it out. If you're on like a tourist visa, they're going to get out of status, married to a citizen, so there's the exception for that. And they say, we're just going to wait it out until they take away this requirement and see what happens. But who knows? I say, if that's what you want to do, that's what you want to do. But I don't know if they're going to take this away. Like I have one case where a person had DACA, deferred action child arrivals, and we had a advanced parole pending, a request for it before the thing became mandatory. And then they finally got the advanced parole. They needed to travel to see a family member that's in need. And then when they come back, they also have the ability to adjust status for the married to a U.S. citizen. But we didn't get to that. So advanced parole got approved a couple weeks ago, and they're set to go. And I said, oh, by the way, you got to get vaccinated because you got to travel back. Now, it was a weird thing where if you're flying in, you had to be vaccinated. But they said if you're driving in on a land border, it's not required to be vaccinated. But they took that away, too. So I'm like, your advanced parole got approved now. You have a 40 days they gave you or some ridiculous like that, a limited amount of time. You got to get in, and they had to get the Johnson & Johnson one shot because at first they didn't want to. I'm saying, listen, don't burn this opportunity. First, you got to see this family member who's dying. We all this work for you to go see him. And then when you come out, you're going to get a green card. You have a clean case. You just need that parole to be paroled in. And so, even if you don't like the vaccine, just get it. I mean, chances are low something's going to happen. If you don't get it, who knows what's going to go down in your life. Life in America sucks when you're out of status, even if you have DACA. So they got it, Johnson going. So it's something that's affecting a lot of things. So be prepared for that. Now, President Biden did come, and one of the things he did is he signed an executive order entitled "The Future is Made in All of America by All of America's Workers," revoking President Trump's Buy America, Hire America executive order, which, unlike the former president's order, was not designed to impede immigration. So there's a lot of things that the Buy America, Hire American order did, and it's like it changed the way they viewed the regulations when President Trump did that. And the focus of consular officers, of USCIS officers, handling stuff. And one of the most annoying things, in employment-based particularly, was taking away deference to pre-existing approvals of I-129s and extensions. So if you got an L1 approved, not always, even back then they wouldn't always do this, but they would have an idea of H-1B in particular. They defer to that previous approval to not have to reanalyze the whole thing again. But that wasn't the case. One of the new things as well that happened during the Trump administration particularly was the delay in dependent biometrics appointments and EADs for H4 category, for L2 category, which is out of control. We have L1 approved, and the spouse would take a year to get their change of status approved and get their biometrics, all this kind of stuff. And there were a lot of lawsuits about this. So I think one thing they did is they took away the biometrics requirement for H4s and L2s, I think, from the lawsuits. And then a really cool thing that happened, litigation with podcast guest Jonathan Wasden and his firm Wasden Bandits was they I think it was them. I don't want to give credit to the wrong people, but they expanded the ability to get automatic incident to status work permission for, I think, E's or E's, just an E's in general, L2s, and I think H4s as well. They got to do something. Can't remember all the details, but is a fantastic thing to get that incident to status. It doesn't make sense that it wasn't like that. It's a new policy, so if you had violated before, you had like an E and then you worked about, that's still going to be potentially a violation. There's a BIA, is it a BIA case or IJ case, something like that, where they read into the regulations, the Code of Federal Regulations, and said it wasn't written properly. So E's dependents can work incident status, and it's not a violation, but it's not the most hardcore case to rely on. Now, Department of State published this page on their website where they talk about the backlogs, and I haven't looked at it recently. I think I saved it. Let me look at it. We're recording right now if I can find it. But they had, like, usually let's say they have 40,000 cases that are documentarily qualified. It jumped up to something like 400,000 or 500,000, kind of crazy numbers. I don't see where I saved the link for it, so I'll just leave it at that. But you're experiencing this if you're doing concert processing. If you have families out, so especially worse is if someone got their appointment in Ciudad Juarez, for example, they go to the interview and then they get hit by something if they're alcoholic or some drug use or something like marijuana use, all of a sudden their waiver, 621A waiver, gets deleted, and then they have to wait another year and then try to get another interview after that. So it's really debilitating for a lot of people. And I have a lot of families that are just separated for years and years, spouses, they're married, they have clean cases, they just can't get an interview. So it's been a really tough time for a lot of families, a very sad situation. Now, on the USCIS end, we're seeing some wild stuff where I'm getting naturalization and adjustment interviews 2 or 3 months after filing in Southern California. So that's been great. But they themselves are seeing the delays that are happening. And one thing that was interesting that they did, well, two things. One is they automatically began a system where they automatically extend I-9 authorization. I-9, let me back to what I'm saying. So I-90s, green card renewals. They know it's going to take so long already that instead of having to go to a fingerprinting appointment and getting that, like a sticker on your thing or getting an ADIT stamp in your passport, you get an automatic 1-year extension through the receipt when you file the I-90. It's similar to how the I-751 was 18 months and you automatically with the receipt extension. And having mentioned I-751, they increased it from 18 months to 2 years. So that's good in a sense that these automatic extensions are happening, so we don't have to fight to get an InfoPass appointment, to get a stamped passport, all that. But on the other end, it just means that they're gearing up for more time delays on these things that are pretty basic. And I-90 should be a I-90, an employment authorization, EAD. And I said, okay, let's leave at those two. Those should be really easy to do. I-751's okay, there's some analysis, but if the person has a good case, I have cases where people have like 2 children together, they have a house together, they have a life insurance, beneficiary name. That shouldn't take more than 10 minutes to review, I think, or maybe, an hour or 2 hours. You got to get these numbers in because some of these are big. And one thing I've been wanting to do a podcast on was reading the Ombudsman's report. It was issued like 6 months ago, and I have notes from that. I wanted to do this podcast 6 months ago, but hopefully we'll do it in February and March. But they said USCIS, as under the impression in their policy, is naturalization, adjustment of status are priority. So we give lower priority to removal of conditions I-751, so you get less officers and less attention. And so consequently, we get huge delays. And one of the annoying thing of delays in 2021, early 2021, was all of a sudden, y'all remember this, the receipt notices were taking forever to come, sometimes 2 or 3 months to get a receipt notice. And that was really frustrating and frightening, especially after a case that had a deadline. And so you're like, is this going to happen? Is it not going to happen? When are they going to open up the packet to see we have it? Because all of a sudden, if there's an issue, the check isn't in the right amount, the signature is not in the right place, the case bounces back, then all of a sudden you have a case that's out of status and you can't refile, and malpractice pops up. And I'm sure it happened to a lot of people because of that. In 2022, I'm recording this. A month ago, I was getting receipts a week after filing, which was really good. But now in February, I'm taking 3 or 4 weeks to get receipts now for adjustment cases. I filed an IA-24. That took 4 weeks to get to me. So it's creeping back up. it's like a yo-yo. It's just so annoying that you can't rely on these time frames. Now they passed a law in Congress, a full-on law saying we have to institute premium processing for all these other categories, for EADs, for EB1C, for EB2C. I'm sorry, yeah, EB1A, EB1 multinational manager, and national interest waiver EB2, and some other categories. But it still hasn't happened. They didn't increase the price, which is listed in that requirement. But other than increasing the price, they didn't hook it up and actually provide the extra services. So what happens was probably going to be a lawsuit on this, but one other lawsuit that did happen, or a couple that did happen, were interesting. There was federal litigation, and I think Curtis Morrison is gearing is ahead on this. But the diversity visa lottery, people who couldn't get an interview because of the travel ban sued, and the judge held a number of these and said the government has to keep a number of these visas open. But it seems like they're not being issued. It's still up in limbo, and families are still waiting to figure out what's going on. So I haven't kept up on the litigation. Chris Morrison's on Twitter all the time talking about it, and they even mentioned that the judge in the case, they said this guy's doing on Twitter too much. But that's something. No, at the end of the day, sometimes you got to file lawsuits to defend the rights of your clients. I'm even potentially going to pick up lawsuits finally, even though I wanted to, then I didn't want to, and I feel like it. But I think like some of these delays are so out of control. I have a Nats case that's pending too long. I'm gonna just pick up the mantle and sue him on this if it takes a 120-day mark and it'll prove this easy to do a citizenship case. Now they say for citizenship in particular, they need to have the entire file before they can close it, which makes sense. But and this is news that came out in 2022, but I thought I'd mention it. Apparently, there's this big cave that they're holding a lot of files in, and because of COVID, they can't let people go in the cave to get the files. As such, people aren't getting their whole package together so they could rest it and put it away when the person naturalizes, leading to delays in naturalization approvals and oath ceremonies. So that's a ridiculous issue to have, and who knows who has it, who's subject to that, who's just subject to a regular delay. I don't know. But the client's getting really frustrated, and I say, you know what? I think maybe we should sue. So we're going to give it another, I think, 2 weeks until the 120-day mark. We're going to have a talk with him, see what he wants to do, and pull that trigger. Now, there was a litigation that I was really happy about, and there were decisions that kind of said this already, but this was really full on about these travel bans and the reasoning of the consular officers and the embassies of not doing interviews for visas and not issuing visas for people subject to potentially travel bans. And the embassy said when you read INA 212, the bans that when they're instituted, that's in the authority of the executive branch, is to not permit people to enter the United States. This doesn't mean they can't issue the visa. So they have to issue the visa if it's appropriate and all that kind of stuff. Meaning that when we have travel bans like the COVID travel ban that said if you're in a country that was listed in the ban for in the last 2 weeks or so, I can't remember the exact, I think it was 2 weeks, then you can't enter the United States. Well, if you're able to go, for example, in France, who was subject to the ban, get an interview and get the visa approved, you can go to a third country that's not subject to it, another country, wait out the 2 weeks and come in. But they didn't give him even the ability to get the visa in the first place. And so that's really wonderful. I'm happy that they did something like that, give people the opportunity to fix it up. We'll see. Now, what happened, especially I saw this in like South African cases, because we're doing a couple of those, is that they might have changed this where they have to issue the visa if it's appropriate, but they're going to say we're too busy or understaffed. We're just simply not going to do embassy visa appointments because we can't. So it's not that we don't want to issue it because now we have to if we have to, but we just don't have time for you. So sorry. So it's a different way to get around to what their goals are, which is to not issue the visas. Now, the positive thing moving on was the end of the I-944, the application for what was the full name of it, but essentially the public charge thing that the President Trump did. They took away, thankfully, so that's really good, as well as the embassy version of it. Courts have stopped that beforehand, but the 5534, something like that, whatever the public charge rule for the DOS was, and we've issued a whole set of new forms. So be prepared. If you have some old set of forms, check the expiration date, check USCIS.gov to see new versions. Just in 2022, they finally updated form, but didn't make the form any more reasonable. Unfortunately, it still doesn't make sense. And even I-131, the advanced parole and reentry permit form. I think they updated, called I-131 or something like that, but it's still the same thing, and it's still confusing because the physical address for the client and the mailing address are not separated, just one address listed there. And there's other issues with the form that don't make any sense. So they don't have the addendum portion to it like they're supposed to for all the other forms. So they update the forms, but essentially it's the same form. It just has a different date on it. So that's that. But one really positive thing that's really frustrating for a lot of practitioners, if you're doing, for example, asylum cases, was the rule where if you leave something blank and you don't write NA not applicable or write none, they're gonna return the case. This was a wild and crazy kind of thing that they did. And it caused a lot of practitioners, myself included, to then go overboard and start doing NA and none on every application, which I kind of stopped the policy to do that. I kind of like it, kind of avoids an officer potentially, one out of a million cricket officer writing something on there that wasn't there. At least we have none was there. But it's come out. But that was like a really scary and weird thing that they instituted that they got rid of. Now, speaking of weird, we not only had one round of H1B, which is how it regularly is, a cap. And we not only had 2 rounds, we had 3 rounds last year. And this is so just unwise how the system for H1B is, because if someone wanted to hire an employee and they went in the first round of like the cap lottery and they weren't chosen, they're probably going to fire them. The person's going to go back home. And then also you have round 2, and it's like, well, life has moved on. What's going on? Then round 3, it's like, do we bring this person back? So it just makes it really hard to be able to plan out when you have these kind of scenarios. So I don't know how to fix it, but the H1B system is just such a mess, how they're doing it. But we are captain right now. I'm sure a lot of people are listening or not listening to this. They're waiting for cap season to be over before they get back into it. They're dealing with clients who are not sending them their paperwork, my office included, and we're waiting for EINs and this and that and payment. Companies take for the last second to do this kind of stuff, and so it keeps you really busy and frustrated having this stuff pop up out of nowhere. But it gave opportunity to some more people who weren't expecting it, so that's neat. Now, they also updated the system for students so that they could do their employment authorization request for OPT online. But as expected, a lot of us started making mistakes, and a lot of people, unfortunately, lost out on the ability to get OPT because it wasn't filed properly, and that creates huge problems. So I wish F1 students would all have an immigration lawyer on their side. They don't think about it. They don't think it's needed. They can't afford it. But I always get people with F1 student issues coming. Almost all of them could have had the issues prevented if they just had legal aid. So lawyers, immigration lawyers, don't study the student visa stuff and know the parts of it. It's a really important part of being an immigration lawyer is understanding how F1 works, how CPT works, how OPT works, how cap gap works, how all the aspects of it work. To better understand it is really nuanced. But there's so many people here on student visas. It's like huge numbers of people, and they're eventually going to do other stuff. So you got to be able to understand what's going on. And it just whenever I dive in that statute and I get new facts and a case, I'm just like, wow, this is a whole world. Immigration reform is impossible because there's just so many different aspects to any different visa case that are going to complicate things. And speaking of complications, if you have Russian clients, you've definitely been dealing with a complicated situation. They now officially moved the Russian IV processing to Prague, which is good. At least get to get their interview now because a lot of people are stalled. And they're not really processing visas in general out of Russia, except for maybe U.S. citizen services and some emergency kind of stuff. Even 2022, they announced that F1s could go to Armenia, I think Kazakhstan, and maybe Prague for their visa processing. Or was it Georgia or something like that? I can't remember. But that's happening. On the other end, they've announced interview waivers happening. I haven't really had to deal with that too much because they're just not scheduling or processing a lot of stuff. But they're trying to speed up the backlog at the embassies and reissuing the ability to do interview waivers, which is shut down by the previous president. Now, on the plus side, COVID-19 has caused flexibility in I-9 verification where you don't have to show the original document. You could send photos or something like that to HR. But what I'm really happy about was the COVID-related response flexibility that increased the time you had to respond to RFPs. And this is just such a pivotal thing. I think they should stay because sometimes when we had 20, 30 days from the decision to file a response or something like that, it just wasn't enough time, especially because they would give a date, they wouldn't post it until 3 days later. Post office would take another 3 days, and by the time you get it, instead of having 30 days, all of a sudden you'd have 21 days because a week of it wasn't processing. And so it was really unfair. I always kept those when they did it, just in case it doesn't go through and they say it's late or something, I would sue them and say, listen, you have a stamp. You say you mailed it on May 1st, but the stamp on the envelope is like May 7th. So you already took away 7 days from us. Post office didn't deliver until May 10th. So all of a sudden, a third of the time need to prepare a response was gone. We're going to sue you on this. Luckily, I haven't had the reason to do that because the case got approved and responded in time. But it's something good to keep is the envelopes on those kind of cases because it's a real dastardly thing. Now, one thing, if you're a podcast listener in the last 2 or 3 years, you've noticed me talk about all the time was the issue that TPS is so inconsistently adjudicated, or TPS adjustments are so inconsistently adjudicated across the board. Well, was that the case I'm talking about? I think I was talking about something else. Sorry, I'm sorry. But there was a SCOTUS thing. TPS, Supreme Court of the United States, said TPS is not admission. And so, yeah, I think that was it because the Ninth Circuit, another circuit said that if you have TPS on itself, that act of getting TPS was an admission. So if you had your EWI or something like that, that admission would cure it, and you could file for adjustment status. For example, if you had an immediate relative case, or you had something that was exempt from 245 and all the like. So that was really cool. But the Supreme Court has closed that gate, and so that's out of there now. Be careful what you wish for. I was hoping there'd be some consistency in the regions in the federal districts, but it worked against us. So unfortunately, those clients lost out. There's a lot of people who had cases about to file and stuff that lost out on that, but that's the unfortunate situation. Now, speaking of unfortunate situations, fortunate or unfortunate, there are lawsuits about EB-5, the investor program, where they said, something was wrong. I think the Trump's guy who signed it was wrong. Something we have to lower the investments amounts. They brought it back down to 500,000 and million or something like that. But then the Congress didn't renew the regional center program, which was the bulk of EB-5. So on one end, people could start investing less. On the other end, they couldn't invest in regional centers. So it's you give with one hand, you take with another. And so the EB-5 program, the mess that it was, got even messier. Unfortunately, they should have these investor programs, but EB-5 is a terribly designed program. There are a lot of people whose whole firm is arranged around. They have friends like that. It's unfortunate that they have a practice area that is just so politically unreliable. And so you got to be careful when you do that kind of stuff. If you're doing EB-5, do E2 as well, because you never know what's happening. And you do E2, that could have its own problems. Like I was doing E2s for Iranians. President Trump said, "Let's get out of our treaty with Iran," and they took that away. So you never know immigration. As much as I love it, you never know it's going to be there tomorrow or it's not. Look at all these travel bans. So it's a weird practice area, but I love it. I'm a glutton for pain, I guess. Now, speaking of practice areas, some stuff, tech and immigration is really expanding. And one aspect of it is not only all the service providers, but also going into bots. And so BAL, Barry Appel Leiden, probably the second biggest immigration-focused law firm in the United States, catching up close to Fragment, announces they created their own bot for processing and computer systems internally. They say it's the first bot, but our colleague Jared Jascott would defer because he has his own bot, Yotango bot, which he's been using and providing. So it's like they go into every aspect. I'm sure we're going to have cryptocurrency immigration somehow in the future because immigration is always on the cutting edge of everything. We deal with the human condition so well. I have clients, and I think we're going to have an article potentially the next issue of people who want to do E2 investments and they got their money transferred to cryptocurrency. And how do you show that and this and that? We were talking with some people at a particular firm. We're maybe going to write an article about that. We'll see. But that's just it. And so when it comes to court, I'm leaving this as one of the last and shortest parts because this is the part I've least experience in. But the immigration court backlog is 1.5 million cases according to Track. So that means your case is going to take a while before it goes to place. Attorney General Merrick Garland, what an interesting name, Merrick. Merrick Garland overturned Castro Tum and reinstated matter of Avitisanyan, which allows which allows immigration judges and the Board of Immigration Appeals to administratively close removal proceedings, which is good. It gives some control back to the immigration judges. And on a side note, I didn't have it listed here. I think the Immigration Judge Union was, broken down under Trump, and they maybe have come back. It's not clear, so we'll see what happens with the IJ Union. But Attorney General also vacated matter of AB, which was a domestic violence based asylum that the previous administration tried to take away, and I guess it's back. I don't know exactly, but that happened. Now, for the last two notes, and on a sad note on both of them, the Afghanistan situation was a disaster, and we have so many people from Afghanistan who are stuck there under terrible circumstances. We're getting calls and emails about that every day. I get probably like at least 2 to 5 messages from Afghans saying help me, and I'm like I can't. I have no idea what to do. At first, everyone learned about humanitarian reinstatement, humanitarian parole, but we realized that's not a realistic thing. They've gotten really harsh adjudicating it. It was always a difficult thing to do. And my office never even did humanitarian parole cases, so that's a daily thing we have to remember and see that these poor people are what they're going through. So I decided, what can we do? We put the situation on the cover of the Immigration Lawyers Toolbox magazine, so practitioners can learn about opportunities, come help, and what the situation is. But that was a big thing in immigration that happened on a humanitarian level, and on our close humanitarian level for our practice. Our colleague Monica Royce passed away last year, and she actually, got an article in the previous issue that was launched, the one happening now, which is already out, about O1 visas. She was very kind to write that. We had planned on her coming on the show, and we already had an interview with her. She's going to come back on the show, talk about her experience with O1 visas. Unfortunately, she couldn't make it into the next year. I wanted to, send my condolences to her family, to our colleagues, particularly in Florida, where she's really active in the, the bar, the chapter, which she was a regular at. We sent our condolences, and we lost several colleagues. And I have a section in the Immigration Lawyers Toolbox magazine that tracked these. We lost 3 colleagues last year. We've already lost 1 or 2 this year. So, and we'll talk about that. One of the founding partner of Erickson Law Firm passed away. Erickson, what is the full name? Erickson Immigration something, I don't know, but they're a good firm that does a lot of work, and that's a good podcast too. And so that's life, man. It really it hits you. It's unexpected. People are young, it happens to. People are old, it happens to. I have kids now, and I think about death every day. And I'm not a person who is really kind of like worried in the sense of what happens. I'm kind of ambivalent to that, like what happens after and stuff. I try to live life as it is. But for me, it's kind of like, okay, I got to make sure we have money and situations so these kids aren't left alone. That's the forefront of my thoughts. And part of the reasons why just expanding the practice to keep things going. If something happens to me, we have a colleague who her husband's sick and she's so busy dealing with the husband, hardly gets to the practice. That happens a lot. And so I'm like, if something happens, we need to have the firm going. That's one reason to expand. In addition to new challenges in life and all this kind of stuff, and just demand for the work that exists. But I went from 12 years of doing everything myself to just changing it up, and my focus changes. When you have people to go from a technical practitioner to more of a leadership position, a visionary position, where you detach yourself, and instead of thinking, day to day, what are we doing today for the cases, next week, and more think about what are we doing next year, 2 or 3 years, what's the plan, how are we going to take care of people, employees and their families. So it's a big shift that's going to be occurring, and you'll be seeing it. I'll be talking about it. If you guys are interested, let me know if you're interested in talking about this kind of stuff. Probably you are, because it's interesting talking open about internal business stuff. I did open up the Immigration Lawyers Toolbox video library, which is a ton of information and CLEs there. Email me if you want to get access to it. You have to be an immigration lawyer to get access to it. But having said that, I'm thinking about creating like a page or some video session where I just talk about open up about finances and decisions and marketing, all that kind of stuff. I could have a call where I could just talk about what I'm doing, and if you're interested in that, that'll probably be paid for. You have to pay for that probably because I'm giving away the everything, and it just takes time to just talk about this kind of stuff. So we got to make some money on it, make it worthwhile. A lot of the stuff I'm doing with the toolbox, it's just a labor of passion. It could probably be a very profitable thing. I just don't have enough time to make it profitable, in the sense that I have all these sponsors that even want to work with me. I don't have time to even send them the contracts to pay, get the money and all that kind of stuff. So that's what I have to hire just to do the basics and keep things going. But it's a new challenge to learn how to run a business. And I'm talking to people. We'll have them on the firm too, and it's a different kind of questions I'm going to be asking people who have firms, have employees, how they develop that and what they find important, their strengths, weaknesses. It's such an important part to keep a cohesive work environment together, so people could thrive and it could be successful. And there's just so much going on in immigration practice to be aware of, between the education, the marketing, the personalities, everything and the like. So download and visit Immigration Lawyers Toolbox magazine at immigrationlawyerstoolbox.com/magazine. The new episode, all these issues are really cool. I could really happily say this is like one of the best things out there for immigration. If you're an immigration attorney and you haven't read the magazine, go look at it and be like, whoa, damn, this guy really put together some stuff with some great colleagues, a lot of information. It really is amazing that's just get together. And so we're just gonna keep pushing it, going forward, and have a place in this space as a leader in helping colleagues both on education, on marketing, and on community. Hopefully in the future we can do conference and stuff like that. That seems like a big thing that we have to work on a lot to get into. But hey, it's doable. People, listeners, you guys listening, you guys reach out to me. I know how much you like it. I know how much you want to participate and care and all that kind of stuff. So keep letting me know. Email me, let you know, and we'll get you in somehow. If you're dedicated, we want to promote people whose voices aren't heard necessarily through the regular channel. The only channel exists, which is AILA. God bless them, they're there, but that's just one. So we got to create other avenues for successful attorneys to let people know they're successful, to get together, to share information, and all that kind of stuff. So email me at info@immigrationlawyerstoolbox.com if you wanted to connect and follow up on any of the stuff I talked about. 2021, good year. 2022 is going to be better. And just keep it positive. Think about the vision of the future. What do you want to be when 2023 starts? How, what exactly it looks. Close your eyes and literally watch it like a movie of what's going on. Not just saying, I like this, I want to be rich. Like, oh, how much money do we want to have? And what do you want to do with that money? You want to add a pool to your house? Imagine yourself in that pool, swimming around with your kids and a barbecue next to it with a steak, and think about that. And then, it's magic, really. It happens. What I found is really having a clear vision, not just saying, oh, it'd be nice to have money. And then we got our backyard would be nicer. Like, how would your backyard be nicer? And obviously the money is for more important stuff. It's more some security. It's to be able to expand your practice, hire people, maybe to give back to your community in different ways. And that's what it's all about. The reason why I could do all this, the community I like to serve is the immigration lawyer community, because that's exponential. Every immigration lawyer helps 100 more immigrants in that way who need the help. And so, the JQK law in my practice subsidizes my ability to come and do all this kind of stuff. So, think about it like that. So how are we going to make more money to do so you can do the things that, really have an effect on your community in the way that you want to do it. All right, everyone, God bless, be safe, and I'll see you in the next episode. Bye-bye.